Mode.
Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to get started now. My name is Laia Greeno and I am the manager of Interactions Evaluation and Program Effectiveness Working Group. The title of today's webinar is Measuring Agency Level Results Part 2 because it's an update to a conversation that began at last year's Interaction Forum, our annual conference. There we go. Our three presenters that we have today, Carr from Catholic Relief Services, Maby Palmisano from ACDI VOCA, and Barbara Willett from Mercy Corps, first shared information on their efforts to measure agency level results at the Interaction Forum last year, and today they'll be giving us an update on the progress they've made over the past year and what they've learned over that time. Many of you are undertaking similar efforts. As you know, as part of the webinar registration process, we asked, is your organization working on establishing a system to measure agency level results? 51 people registered from 33 organizations, and of those, 25 organizations, including the three represented by our presenters, said their organization was working on establishing a system to measure agency level results. 3 said that they were not but were interested in doing so. 3 didn't provide a response, and 2 didn't know, or people different people that registered from the same organization provided different answers, so it's unclear whether they are or not. So again, there's a lot of organizations attempting this and a lot of experiences to share, and this meeting today is just part of an ongoing conversation that we've had to share what the community is doing on this front. Just a few logistical things before I turn it over to our presenters. You are on mute and will remain on mute for the duration of the presentations. We'll go through the 3 presentations first and then take questions at the end. And you can, this is how you can ask questions, or just a few things. First, if you want to minimize that control panel, you can click on the orange arrow you see there. You can also view the presentation in full screen mode by clicking that blue square, and you can, if you have a question, you can type it in that question box and I'll pose it to our presenters at the end of the webinar. So feel free to send me things as we go along, and I'll have those in mind. Just one other note, we will be sharing the presentations afterwards, and we are also recording this session, and it'll be available on Interactions website afterwards as well. So with that, thank you all again for joining us, and I am going to turn it over to Carr from Catholic Relief Services now. So just 1 second as we transition over.
Hello, hello.
Perfect.
Perfect. I'm assuming people can hear me as I sit here. It's great to be following up on this 1 year later. We're using the same title that we had before, Measuring Agency Level Results. And at CRS, the way we've addressed agency level results is to look at our beneficiary service delivery. Coverage indicators that you might call at the output level, but we think these are indeed agency-wide performance measures. If we can, and we're in the process of developing it, that we'll be able to talk about beneficiaries across different program areas and geographic areas and be looking at apples and apples. And we also think that these are measures that are really fundamental outputs of our agency. Sometimes the word output is a little demeaning, I think, but if we can identify, count, and track our beneficiaries by the services that we deliver, by gender, by age, geographic area, we'll be doing quite a lot, I think, in terms of measuring our performance. So we're focused on service delivery and beneficiaries served. to talk about beneficiaries and who they are, we have to first of all, I think, look at what the services are that we're delivering, what the benefits are. At CRS, we have a wide range of things that we do. Some of them are oriented towards direct and indirect beneficiaries. These are the kinds of projects that have some identifiable benefit that is in some way or another delivered to an identifiable group of people. There are other kinds of things that we do, policy advocacy, environmental protection, that aren't primarily oriented towards direct beneficiaries or indirect beneficiaries. Certainly people benefit, and there will be ultimate beneficiaries from these kinds of projects, institutional strengthening or community empowerment. But their immediate purpose is to build capacity or to protect an environment. And so these we see are really the beneficiary-oriented projects are what BSDI is oriented towards. And these other ones, other projects that are policy advocacy and environmental protection, institutional strengthening, are really not covered by the BSDI process that I'm about to describe. And so what I want to do is just briefly describe it, because some of you may not have heard it last year, and then, as Elias said, go into what we've done over the last 2 years and last year and what we've learned. So CRS, I mentioned before we talk about beneficiaries, to think about them, we have to think about beneficiaries of what kind of a service. CRS has 8 major program areas that we do. They're shown there on the screen. Each one of those, or most of them, have a wide variety of sub-programmatic areas within them. I think microfinance is probably the narrowest of what we do, and it may be that peace building is the broadest. So each one of these program areas has a lot of different things, and what we want to do is ideally break these program areas down into sub-program areas. Some people hate that term, sub-program area, but be that as it may, if we look at water sanitation as a program area, just as an example, what we've done is we've broken it down into 4 major categories of water for domestic use, water for productive use, for environmental protection and emergencies. And each one of those then can be broken down into sub-program areas, or what we're calling services. So when I use the word services, it's like sub-program area, programmatic area. And then it's possible to talk about the beneficiaries of each of those services, as you can see here in the case of water and sanitation. They're general definitions, but they match the service area that's in question. And you'll see from the indirect beneficiaries column, the precision of those, in this example, indirect beneficiaries, is pretty vague. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But this is what we want to try to do. We want to try to break our program areas down into sub-programmatic areas, and then the beneficiaries who receive those services. So I'm going to focus for a minute on emergency service, emergency program area, the shelter sub-program area, and within that, transitional shelter. I think there are 3 different services within emergency and shelter, but I'm going to focus here on transitional shelter, just to show you the kind of construct that we want to develop for each of these services, so that if we can, for instance, in the case of transitional shelter, talk about not only what the service area is, but how, in what form is the service being provided. It's an inelegant term that I have, means of service delivery, but the alternatives there, for example, with transitional shelter are we can train people, we can provide technical assistance in transitional shelter, we can provide assets, we can provide commodities, and there might be other forms of in which the service is delivered. So we want to be able to track beneficiaries not only by, in this example, transitional shelter, but also by the kinds of services that are being delivered. And then we want to be able to identify a beneficiary for that particular service. And so if we look at, I'm going to go back one here. So far we've talked about the definitions, and essentially it's a taxonomy of what CRS does and the beneficiaries who receive those services. Part of the BSDI effort is on that taxonomy and getting our definitions agreed to amongst our senior technical advisors, and then instituting those definitions as general as they are across the agency for beneficiary data collection. The data definition is just one part of it. Data collection is the other part. So in developing this process, it was important to look at how we gather our data right now. And one of the principles before we started BSDI was to not develop anything that was going to require onerous data collection methods, surveys or focus groups that might be outside the normal practice of project managers. So we wanted simple data gathering methods, and we wanted the data to be meaningful to people on the ground, project managers, country program directors, and regional program directors. Now, the program flows, the data flow from a project under BSDI will start at the point of service delivery, where a beneficiary is registered by the types of services that they're eligible for receiving in the given project, and that typically now is done on paper and pencil. But those data then move up to, at some intermediate level, whether it's a regional office or a partner office, they move to that level, and typically in our case are at that level at least entered into Excel files. Sometimes they're entered into Excel files earlier, but by the regional or partner office level they get transferred to Excel files, and they go then to the project management database, and this is a generalized kind of a process flow, but and that database will vary from project to project. It might be nothing more than Excel sheets linked, or it might be Access database or relational database. But those data then, those beneficiary service delivery data will flow into that management or project management database. It's important to say now that these indicators, the informational services and beneficiaries, become, for the project managers, really part of their monitoring data. This is as important as the output or outcome data that they're gathering periodically. So within that database, we're not only containing monitoring data and outcome survey-based data, if you will, but also this demographic and beneficiary registration kinds of data. And from the management database, those data now will flow either out into reports or into an agency-wide database that we're developing in CRS. We're calling it PIMS. It's kind of I think every agency probably has a project information management system, but this is ours, and the idea is that these data will then flow into PIMS. So when we're also doing a lot of work with ICT4D, and that to the extent that it's going to be possible in the future that data will be transferred and collected through digital data mechanisms, then they will be used rather than paper, and the delivery mechanism and process will be much more direct. So what are the products, the performance products that we're offering, that BSDI is going to be able to provide? I think the most important product that it's going to provide is accurate and annual, up-to-date beneficiary information. How many people are we serving, in what kinds of service areas, gender, geographic areas? If we can get this, and we don't have it now, we will have actualized beneficiary data that will be very valuable and can be then compared at the project level to the percent of beneficiaries that are targeted for receipt of those services, and we can work up percentage targeted beneficiaries who receive the service. So it's not only number but percent targeted who receive. There the indicator enters more into a performance kind of a measurement. We're also going to be able to combine through this PIM system, the performance technical data is going to be housed with the financial data at the project level, so that we can combine financial and technical data and come up with cost per beneficiary types of measures. Again, an element, a dimension of this that adds, I think, power to BSDI. And finally, and I think what's most important, is it's going to give us a way to be able to identify where we're double counting beneficiaries. This is a problem we all have projects that provide more than one service. Title II project, for example, where nutrition, agriculture, microfinance services might be provided. How do we make sure that we're counting both the number of people who receive at least one of those services in that project, as well as the number of services that are being provided under that project? So separating out double counted from unique beneficiaries, the term we're using. So this is where we want to end up. These are the products that we want to be able to deliver. What we've done in the last year is we've added on validation trips. In the first year I made a validation trip to the Central Africa regional projects for CRS. This last year I visited West Africa and Latin America. As I do these validation trips, they're really important because it lets me see not only different kinds of projects, but it also lets me see to what extent right now beneficiary data are being collected, how they're being collected, what the databases look like, and particularly whether the kinds of definitions and service categories that we're developing in BSDI actually make sense, whether they're reflected at that level. For instance, the water and sanitation categorization that I showed you before. I visited a project in West Africa where I asked the question, do those categories exist? And in fact, they do. So we did validation trips. We also piloted BSDI in West Africa. We had our emergency regional technical advisor. When he learned about this, he thought it would be interesting to apply it to the 5 countries in which we're providing Sahel crisis area projects. And so the BSDI was tested there, and a database for receiving the data was set up. And over 6 months, we tested BSDI as it existed at that point. And that ended in December of this past year. Another thing we did, and this is really important, is that we coordinated what we're doing in BSDI with a lot of other things that are going on in the area of data collection throughout the agency. So there were various visits and meetings and working groups that I participated in to make sure that BSDI data is not going to be duplicated or overlapped or somehow missed in other kinds of things that we're developing, data management systems. And finally, I wanted to look at what other agencies are doing in counting beneficiaries. For example, Save the Children in this Beneficiary Reach project. They've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now. International Red Cross has a particular set of indicators. So this is what I did last year. One more thing happened. We had I'm calling this a catapult event, a board meeting in March that led to a request that we provide beneficiary data for the board meeting. And so we did a beneficiary survey at the beginning of this year, throughout February and into early March, so that in March those beneficiary data could be reported. The beneficiary survey was conducted under pretty tight constraints, very tight timeline, as I'm showing here. We did want both direct and indirect beneficiaries in that service. In the survey that we did 2 years ago, we just did direct beneficiaries. We wanted them by major program areas, and also we wanted the data submitted electronically, and we set up a system in our financial budget data management system for capturing beneficiary data. What we had set up at that time, let's say early February of this year when the survey was done, we had our service area categories pretty well developed. We had direct beneficiary definitions fairly well understood in the program areas and in the projects. Indirect beneficiary definitions, however, were not formulated well, and as I did my validation trip, I found that it was going to be a hard concept to capture. And finally, we had no common procedures for collecting and particularly reporting data. So these were the constraints, the time constraints that we were under. We did it, though, in a period of 3 weeks. And the lessons we learned included lessons that were related to the beneficiary data itself. We learned a lot about what kind of guidance we need to do, because we're about to enter into implementation, what kind of guidance we need to provide to the field in terms of what they need, what we're asking for them to report. Laya, I've got this issue where my advancing is not, the slide is not advancing. So
do you want to try escaping? Yes. Do you want to try escaping and restarting it?
It's not escaping either. So the same as we had this morning.
Here.
So
Apologies for the technical glitch. Do you want me to switch it?
I am leaving the.
Oh, I think we lost Hap. Um, yes, we did. Um, Maby, can I turn things over to you if Hap doesn't join in?
Sure.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Maby now, and then hopefully we'll get Hap back. So giving you the presenter role now.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. This is Maby Palmisano from ACDI VOCA. And as Hap was doing, I am trying to follow up from what we presented last year at Interaction. So we have created 3 years ago this database named CaPISC, Capturing Performance and Impact on a Statistical Canvas. The whole idea was for our agency to really have a warehouse of all the performance monitoring plan for all our projects, a place where everybody from each division of the company could really take a look at the indicators, the performance indicators for their projects. So we created this database, it's a web-based database, and the objectives of CaPISC were to, as I said, warehouse of PMPs, to support the process of designing new projects, and once a proposal was awarded, help really the project to keep track of the indicators. So CaPISC is a tool that helps in designing proposals. The causal modeling session that we have right as soon as we receive an RFP or RFA helps in designing new PMPs and M&E plans. So it is basically a data bank of indicators. Then the second step, once a proposal is awarded and becomes a project, then we enter all the indicators of each project into CaPISC. And then CaPISC has the same intervals, the same data collection and data reporting frequency as the performance monitoring plan that we submit to the donor. So once all this information was in CaPISC, the whole idea to have CaPISC was to be able to aggregate the information from the project level and report at the company level. As I said, this exercise started 3 years ago. On this slide, I just wanted to quickly present how and what is the process, the data collection flow and the reporting flow. It happens at the field level. Once a PMP is approved, it's then sent to HQ here in Washington. We enter the skeleton of the PMP, meaning the indicators. For at a quarterly level or an annual level, the field enters the data into CaPISC because each project is given a password and a username to his or her own project, so there is no manipulation of other projects. Then the backstopping from Washington provides support to the M&E specialists in the field to really populate CaPISC. And then at the end of the year, we aggregate information and we report the information. I am happy to say that as of now, so we were able to do this exercise, full exercise, for 2012. So I will present now some of the preliminary data that we have collected as of 2012. So this is the first time that we were able to see CaPISC in all its potential and report a little bit of the information that we have collected into CaPISC. What I present here is what CaPISC really can do. I forgot to mention that CaPISC is a very low budget database, web-based database. I identified a local company who could help me design this web-based database. It is an SQL format, but does not have all the fancy things that many other databases could have, but it's really a starting point for us, and I'm really happy that I have this tool. So what CaPISC can do, can provide, as you can see on the left-hand side, where you have these color boxes, This is one of the practice areas with ACDI VOCA and gives a snapshot of how each project within that practice area is performing, how the indicators of each of these projects are performing against the targets that were set for that reporting period. As I said, the reporting period was 2012, so red means that they're not getting on target, yellow is they are between 85% of their targets, and green is they are 100 to 120% of their targets. When you say gray, means that there is no data. So this really, the whole idea is to have CaPISC as a management tool. On the right-hand side, you see within each practice areas the same projects, and the blue bubble tells where the projects that have actual data into CaPISC for the reporting period. And finally, at the bottom, you have a dashboard. So for each of the projects, we have identified 5 or 6 indicators that are key for the chief of party, for the director, the project director, to see on at his convenience how the project is performing. So NAFACA is one project, and there are here 5 indicators, and we tell the chief of party in lifetime how these indicators are doing against the targets for the reporting period. Again, it was 2012. Again, you have a snapshot from CaPISC that gives you an idea of green, yellow, how these individual indicators are doing. For us, it's very important to disaggregate that by gender and to have gender disaggregated data per the indicators where obviously disaggregation is possible. So why do we have CaPISC? The importance of the indicators in CaPISC. As I said before, for new business, to report to donors, to help management of the project, both at HQ as well as in the field. We really strongly believe in adaptive management, so learn as we are doing, rather than really learning after the event had happened. Help us determine which of our approaches work. ACDI VOCA is divided in 5 practice areas, and we have different approaches that we implement in the different practice areas. So we want to see what is working and how is working. Helps, as I said, HQ to really see and review the performance and provide oversight to the projects, and allows the president of the company here in Washington to really see how all the practice areas are performing, and within each practice area, the individual projects. As I said, ACDI VOCA work is organized around 5 practice areas: agribusiness, community development, enterprise development, financial services, and food security. Currently, we have 66 projects in these 5 practice areas. 59 of these projects had data entered in CaPISC. And I'm very proud of this outcome. 16 of these projects were closed in 2012, so the data that we were able to report at the end of the year were actually cumulative of the 5 or 3 years of performance. 43 are active projects, and 7 have just been awarded, so there was no data into CaPISC. The next 2 slides really present a handout that comes from CaPISC, and it is a handout that we use to review the projects on an annual basis. So again, we really wanted CaPISC to be a management tool and be utilized as such. Each of the indicators for this specific project, and this is a project that actually closed in Kenya, you can see the goal and you can see the actual value and the performance according to these yellow, red, and green color scheme. Now, because of the number of projects that we have, and because of the fact that we didn't have a global set of indicators, that each project had a number of indicators. And I wrote here, we had 4,458 pieces of information in CaPISC. So across these 6 practice areas for the 66 projects. So it's an incredible amount of information that was in CaPISC. So we sat down at the end of the year 2012 to really try to figure out what these 4,458 pieces of information were telling us. So there was an exercise of synthesizing CaPISC, the information in CaPISC, and we came up that these 4,450 pieces of information really tell the story around 5 categories: rich, beneficiaries basically, So the information on the global number of beneficiaries that we have directly or indirectly work with across the projects. Economic change. Basically, under economic change, we aggregated all the indicators that had anything to do with improvement of economic status, productivity, yields, income, some forms of income, some measures of income or assets, and then volume or value of productivity. A third category was behavioral social change. So, and I'm thinking here on some of the projects that we have under the MIAPS or Title II, where we work with a change in the behavior, like hygiene or nutritional behavior, or also another project under community development where we really want to change the perception towards the government or trust, so, or educational also change. Then again, for our more food security related projects, we collect a lot of information with regards to health and nutrition. The nutritional status of children, of women, pregnant lactating women, indicators like wasting, stunting, undernutrition or malnutrition or anemia. Finally, one of the indicators that is one of the categories that is probably the most important to me is the sustainability. So what do we mean by sustainability? What is the impact that we really want to achieve? Once ACDI VOCA leaves the country, leaves the field, leaves the project, what is the likelihood that the beneficiaries will keep doing what we try to, work with them. And we put under this category those indicators that have to deal with adoption of technologies or management practices, job opportunity, and so forth. I wanted to put here a little nota bene, meaning that indicators are not the only way that we use to evaluate the performance of a project. It's certainly one of the many ways that we could use to review projects' performance. As I said, we have 66 projects in 38 countries in 5 regions. 59 of these had data. And the first information that I was able to do, for the first time really we were able to do, to report, is the number of beneficiaries that we had in 2012. And this information came because of CaPISC. So we had a 3,129,000, I'm so sorry, 3,129,050 and 50 beneficiaries, and you can see the disaggregation by location, by region in the world, and we can do obviously to the country and to the geographical location within each of these countries that we work in. And we also have, we were able to disaggregate by direct and indirect beneficiaries. So this is the first time that we can do with a high degree of certainty, that we can report with a high degree of certainty the number of beneficiaries that we had worked with in 1 year. In this slide, we have the disaggregation by practice area, both direct and indirect. So one of the most important things that I also mentioned at the very beginning is that ACDI VOCA, as all of us, are very interested in reporting the disaggregation in gender. As we all know, our main donor, Elise, is very interested in having gender disaggregated data. We as a company are trying to really being able to integrate gender-sensitive activities in our project. So in the definition of global reach, I stress the importance of should be disaggregated by gender. Unfortunately, only a quarter, less than a quarter of all our projects had gender disaggregated data. But again, we were able to report on this only because we had information entered into CaPISC. From this chart, you can see that only one project, 2 projects under one of our practice area were the ones who were reporting on gender disaggregated data in community development. Other indicators we were able to collect and report upon because of the work that ACDI VOCA does, working on associations and producer organizations, basically organizations, we were able to report 5,251 where our organization has beneficiaries. But only 19% of the projects that had data into CaPISC had actually reported actual numbers versus targets in the system. And again, here you have the distribution by the practice areas. Same with households. We don't work only with individuals. We work with households. Again, you can see here the number 300,000 households were reached by ACDI VOCA's interventions in 2012. And these are counts. They're not outcome level indicators, but it has been a process to be able to really report on these numbers. Then as I said, we had these 4,458 pieces of information, and one of the key pieces of information I wanted to be able to report is the sustainability of our activities. So sustainability and the sustainability category go those indicators that aim to show that the project initiatives will have some sort of impact with the beneficiaries we reach that will last beyond the life of project. So under these, probably you're familiar with this Feed the Future and NF indicator, Hectares under improved technologies and management practices. University of VOCA was predominantly on agricultural development. We were able to report that 40,000 hectares were improved by our activities. Another indicator is adoption of new technologies. Unfortunately, only 20, so less than a third of the projects that are currently implemented by ACDI VOCA reported on this indicator and an actual numbers. And the median of adoption of technologies across these 20 projects was 100. So a good number, a good success. However, let's keep in mind it's only for 20 projects and only for 1 year. Then we pose, because of CaPISC, because of this analysis, this tool that helped us to do a little bit a better inner analysis of what we are doing and who we are. Each project has, on average, we were able really to report on how many indicators were on average on projects, how many indicators per IR or sub-IR were in each PMP. So we did this little analysis, a small analysis, and we realized that we had on average 5 objectives, either intermediate results or sub-IRs. 3 indicators per work objective would be normally needed, but we had also a maximum of 7. Ideally, we would like to see 18 to 20 indicators per project. This is sort of like the good practices that we think are. But on average, a project has 24 indicators. So we have 5 indicators per IR or objective, and the current range of numbers of indicators per project were from 5 to 71. So you see that it's a large range, Again, are these numbers right? Is this a good predictor of the success or failure? No, it's certainly not. The number of indicators in FMP, it's not a good predictor of the success or failure of a project. But yet it will help us to really understand and assess the progress and the achievement of our project. We also realize that it's extremely burdensome to have a project that has 71 indicators without mentioning the level of disaggregation. If we have 70 indicators in a PMP, if we are at the level of disaggregation, we probably get to 200 indicators. And you can certainly see how hard it would be for a monitoring evaluation specialist in the country to really be able to keep track of all of this piece of information. So just going back to what I was said to present last year, and in addition to the information that we have collected this year, so enriched with the information that we were able to analyze because of CaPISC, I went back to the vision that ACDI VOCA has, of the vision of ACDI VOCA, to work in a world that has people who are empowered to succeed in the global economy. Our mission is to promote economic opportunities for cooperatives, enterprises, and communities and individuals through innovative practices. And the values really are to promote positive economic and social change worldwide. So this is our vision. This is our values. We have 4,458 pieces of information that we were able to categorize in those 5 categories. So there is really the need now for us, and because of CaPISC, to move towards a set of global indicators. And we have identified some of the indicators that we think could be considered global, because ultimately what we want to assess is the sustainability of the ACDI VOCA activities after we leave the projects. So we will organize, we will make sure that each project from now on will collect the same information with the same indicator, and we will provide PRS, performance indicators reference sheets for these global indicators. We will provide also a data collection tool so that the way the information is collected in Uganda or in Malawi is collected exactly the same way. Now, I really appreciate Hap's presentation because those are also the same questions that we are posing ourselves. So CaPISC is an aggregate, is a warehouse of PMPs. It's a repository of tables of indicators. At the same time of developing these, we are also thinking to develop a beneficiaries tracking database where really at each project level to be rolled up to something here at HQ so that we can really report the total number of people that we've been working with, not as an aggregate measure as the one I presented before, but having for each of the 3,129,000 people that we work with, their sex, their age, the location where they live. So at this aggregated level, at the project level to be aggregated here in Washington. So we're working also on this database. Thank you.
Thank you, Maby, or Maby, sorry. Hap, I know we lost you for a second, but if you just had a couple more slides to share the lessons learned before we turn it over to Barbara, or should I switch it over to you?
Just for a second, if you could.
Sure. Turning it over now.
Hello?
Yep.
I just wanted to, am I speaking to the group? Oh, now we're advancing. I'm going to go quickly through. We learned a lot in the survey of beneficiaries about what kind of guidance we need to provide once BSDI is rolled up. Learned a lot about that, what things were understood clearly and what things were not. And one of the things we really learned was indirect beneficiaries, and I'm interested in talking with Maby about how we found that each project, a similar project in two different places, might define its indirect beneficiaries differently. And I also found in the crisis projects that we did the pilot in that indeed one agency, OFDA, itself defines its direct beneficiaries and indirect beneficiaries, the same kind of project, differently between one country and another in that region. So indirect beneficiaries were a problem for us. We also learned that there were a couple little project problems with the e-budget system for reporting the data, but those were worked out and we decided we could use that system. Yes, I think the main lesson we learned was that having accurate beneficiary data, accurate and timely beneficiary data, really is valuable. We learned that I'm going to race ahead here, that in fact in the past we had not been reporting as accurate data as we thought we had. So we really learned from the survey the importance of the primary importance of beneficiary data. We also recognize that in the longer term goal we do need to identify outcome indicators at the program level, similar to the ones that Maby was talking about, but that's a process of agreement, reaching agreement between our STAs, senior technical advisors, and program managers, as to which those might be, and that they're probably going to be in selected program areas. So we are convinced about the value of beneficiary data, and we are looking forward to developing outcome level indicators at the program area. Over.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Hap. We just have one more presentation to go from Barbara, and then we are eager to hear from you in terms of what questions you might have. And again, feel free to send those over to me as you think of them. So Barbara, I am turning it over to you now for your presentation. And you might be on mute, so remember to unmute yourself as well.
I am now unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for being here. And Maby, it was really great and very exciting to hear developments in your systems and the progress you guys have made. It's really impressive work. I'm talking about Mercy Corps' vision of measuring agency level results, which we call mission metrics. And how do I advance? Oh, there it goes. Okay, sorry. So what is mission metrics for us? Early on, we embarked on this journey to, as an agency, try to understand what we were achieving, how we're doing in terms of our mission statement, and as you all know, as opposed to thousands of pieces and parts of indicators and results and programs. So we went back to our mission statement and wanted to know, what are we achieving? So this is Mercy Corps' mission statement. Alleviating suffering, poverty, and oppression. What we really keyed in on here and what people really take away from our mission statement is those keywords of secure, productive, and just communities. So at the risk of overwhelming you, I'm going to show you our framework and confess that I'm not a graphic designer, but this reflects really probably a good 2 years worth of work on the part of us as an agency, a very collaborative process. Going back to the mission statement, if we want to understand our progress towards achieving mission, of course we need to think about it in more sort of concrete and measurable terms than the aspirational statement itself. So as I said, secure, productive, and just are really the key words that we focus on when we think about what we're trying to do. So we wanted to start with some definitions, some shared understanding of what we mean by these terms, and as well other terms and ideas related to the mission statement. So you can see here at the top the statement and then the definitions of secure, productive, and just, and we think of those as the ways that we alleviate the suffering, poverty, and oppression that we're trying to address. So those were definitions. Again, a lot of time spent as an agency working through these and really wordsmithing and trying to get it just right so that it meets our expectations and our aspirations, and that we have some, if not unanimity, at least some general consensus. Now then, under those definitions, we went deeper into what does that really look like? And we developed these sets of themes and indicators. There are 10 themes in all, 3 that fit sort of under what we call secure communities, 3 under productive communities, and 4 under just communities. And even though there is somewhat overlap across these ideas, they still sort of fundamentally describe what we're talking about when we say secure, productive, and just. And that gives us really more of a flavor of what are we really trying to achieve. And then under each of those themes, we developed some indicators, sort of indicators. We call them mission indicators, and we think of them as either baskets or buckets or categories by which we can start to understand the program, the really specific program and context-specific program results within this larger framework. So I'll talk a little bit more about kind of how this all works. But this is generally the framework and how we think about our work. So, one thing that we tried to do from the beginning is try to make sure that this wasn't adding another layer of work and responsibility and process to the work that the field teams are doing. So we didn't want to create a new set of indicators or something different from what they're doing. So this is all taking program indicators and trying to bring them into this framework. So program indicators at a field level are aligned with one or more mission indicators. So they're just kind of, it's a mapping process. I'll show you a couple of screenshots from our data system where that happens. Then they report those results into our system. These results, whenever they're ready from the field side, it depends completely on the program cycle, and we don't drive that except that we try to get all the results in once a year so we can review and analyze, which is the third bullet there. We then sort of collect everything, we review everything that comes in for quality, we check the methodologies that are used for particularly collecting survey data. Then once we're satisfied with all the results, we aggregate it, bring it together, compile it, analyze, we discuss and present. We're making this a much more iterative process this year and getting the stakeholders across the agency to help us look at it and interpret and see what's meaningful or missing from the analysis. And then we collectively, again, make recommendations for what we should do as a result of what we're seeing. And we try to keep that as our sort of the foundational purpose for this process, is what are we doing differently as an agency because of what we see here. And then in turn we want to continue to monitor the actions that we take and the things that we do to see what we learn from that and see how effective those changes actually are. We call this the cycle of learning for mission metrics. It's been a lot of development in the early years of this process, and then a lot of focus on the data collection and analysis. But what we're really getting better at now is the reflection side and the discussion, what to do with the information that we find, how to get decisions made and take action and track those actions over time and learn from those, as well as the continual sets of data that continue to come in. I've got just a couple of screenshots. I won't go into detail, but people ask us about the data system, and it was something we developed in-house. This is a shot of the alignment screen where people just enter. It's a program indicator at a time by grant. Enter your indicator and align it with, again, one or more mission indicators, because things can have multiple purposes. And then once those are in the system and the indicators exist and are aligned, then when the data is ready, you can come in here and enter just a few specific data fields around your particular results. Very, very difficult to try to hone in on a standard set of fields. Since we have a huge diversity of programming, I think all of you can relate to that. But we do have some basic fields that we can get people to enter and then start to do some aggregation. So let me just preface that the next few slides are going to be examples of some of the data and some of the different ways that we are looking at it, and some of the different uses we find for it. So there's some sort of descriptive level analysis that we do, that we sort of, the data geeks in us and the ones that are really focused on the process need to know and understand and apply. So this is just looking at the number of results as they apply to different mission indicators. And this kind of gives us a sense of the trends in our work, in our programming. We can then map this against what strategic objectives. We're going through the strategic planning, annual planning process right now for the countries and the regions and the agency as a whole. We can start to sort of think about that in terms of what the actual results on the ground are showing. This is our second, it's actually the third year that we've implemented the system. The first year we called kind of a do-over. It was a very useful process. We didn't consider it a full analysis because there were issues with data quality. But looking seriously at 2011 and 2012, we can start to see where certain areas are dropping off or expanding. And so that's just something of interest to us. Another way I think is useful to analyze the results, again for the data geeks in us, and I struggle with how to explain this to the program people but in language that they understand. But what this does is take, as I told you, indicators are first aligned with mission indicators, and then there's sort of a blank set there, a blank canvas, for which results will be then later sort of overlaid. And there are a number of reasons that we may not have results for all indicators in the system at any given point in time, because some of the programs may have just started, results aren't ready yet, a little bit lost to data quality issues. But then we also want to make sure that we're reflecting on any other possible reasons. So this is one of our sort of assurances that people are not just entering the good stuff, and that we're able to really look across all results that are meaningful to us and kind of be able to get to that place of what's effective and what's not effective, and what do we need to be learning from the actual results. So this gives us a kind of a roadmap as to where are things being intentionally aligned. We intend to measure something, but then in the end we don't get results, and why is that? So that's one of our internal ways of looking at things from our team side. But from the programming side, then we can start to dig into the actual results and what different teams within the agency want to know or should want to know. So for example, here's some emergency data. Our emergency services are the only place that we actually do just a straight beneficiary count. We do some other measurement around that, but for the rest of the mission indicators and the program indicators that go in the system, we're really focused on outcome level results. So there's not any kind of reach or beneficiary count associated with the system overall, with the exception of emergency beneficiaries. So here I now have, and one thing about the 2010 data set was that, at least on the emergency side, it's really numbers of beneficiaries. That data I feel pretty comfortable with. So here we can kind of see, I don't like to talk about trends when it comes to emergencies, because you know, there's so much at play here, and of course 2010, 2011 both had significant mega disasters. So a real drop-off in numbers for 2012, but what's been interesting to us is to see, you know, how the water and sanitation numbers have actually kind of increased over time, even when total beneficiary numbers for emergencies and total numbers of emergencies, in fact, have gone down. So that's something as an agency we're starting to look at is our approaches and resources and what's available to support the water and sanitation work. Digging in a little bit more, this is still on emergencies, but this is the kind of analysis we can do with other types of results. Again, just some of the, it's a little mix of qualitative and quantitative. This is digging into the individual results, because for any mission indicator we can have, you know, anywhere, as Maby's example, 5 to 71, we could have probably anywhere from 1 to 25 different program indicators, maybe even more, that are aligned with a specific mission indicator. So very hard to aggregate the actual outcomes, but we can start to look at what the trends and categories are. So here you've got sort of two layers of analysis. First, we're looking at, this is an indicator measuring the extent to which we have captured a change, measured a change in emergency beneficiaries' conditions, whether it's their conditions around water and sanitation, shelter, cash or economic concerns, health or food security. So those are our main categories. So you can see them color-coded by those categories, but then we've also broken out because people want to say, well, what kinds of change, to what extent, what do you really mean by how many people have shown change? So these are all the different ways that we've been measuring that in this particular indicator. So kind of a lot of different levels and layers. It's a limited set of data fields overall in the system, but just an unlimited thousands, as Maby said, thousands of different pieces of data available for analysis. And really what, like I said earlier, what we're trying to do this year a little better, a little differently is get more people involved in helping us understand what the data is showing and helping us to interpret and ask good questions about what they want to know and what they want to learn from it, and then we can help facilitate the analysis in a more participatory and hopefully meaningful way for all those information stakeholders. A couple of other things that I'm interested in exploring and we're trying to do more of this year is sort of the visualization and different ways of displaying and presenting data. This is done through Tableau, and we're exploring ways of doing it with Google Fusion tables now, so it's more accessible. But this particular chart here, this map, is just about economic development. So you can see all the mission indicators on the right. It's interactive. I could choose any of them, but here I've just focused on the 3 indicators that are related to economic development. So we've got one on household prosperity, one on improved markets, and one on new jobs created. And by the color coding, I can see which of the indicators have been reported in these countries, and I can also sort of hover over a particular thing and start to see what the actual results are. So doing more sort of layering of information to allow people to get into the information and see more about who's doing what and what programs are engaged and what actual results we're seeing. So I've got a couple of slides I'll go through fairly quickly just about the benefits and strengths and what this has done for us both at an agency level, and my next slide will be at the field level. But some of the things that we see is that this at least for our outward face, the system has really helped us demonstrate how committed we are to accountability and to reflection on our successes and our learning, our organizational learning. What are we learning and how are we improving as an agency? It's also allowed us to create shared language just by the definitions and the terms and sort of the values that are imbued in all of this. So the field programs can really see where they fit within the larger organization and the larger mission of Mercy Corps. It gives us the opportunity to talk about real data when we talk about the meaningful change, when we talk about what we do in secure and productive and just communities and the nice language and the nice pictures and stories, and we've got real data behind that as well. This is also this year, like I said, offered an opportunity for us to really be looking at results at the same time we're doing strategic planning and identify ways that we can use the system and the process to measure and hold ourselves accountable for internal goals and objectives as well as program level. And one of the really important things that's happened from the beginning is to really highlight gaps. This shows us as much about what we don't measure as about what we do, and so we want to be sure that the things that we claim about our effectiveness and our reach and our impact as an agency, that we really have solid evidence behind it. So what we've found is that there are certain areas that we're not as strong in measurement. So that's been a great opportunity for us to really strengthen certain areas. And in terms of, this really was very much driven by HQ, driven by senior leaders to say, hey, we need to understand better at this macro level what we're doing. And also definitely it was developed as an internal performance measurement, not as like a PR tool. But we've found all kinds of uses and benefits that sort of go well beyond the original scope and intent. At a field level, we found that field staff are able to connect to the agency. They have now this repository of information at a country level of the programs and results that they've collected, which is sometimes hard when you've got multiple programs and data systems and staff. So this is at least an opportunity for some centralization there. It gives a lens both from the agency's viewing of and commenting on data and hopefully at the country level as well, reflecting on measurement quality and practices and ensuring that there's some standard there. And it is sort of a platform for standardizing, whether it's the choice of indicators that you make. You've got 5 different programs working on market systems. Let's make sure all 5 are measuring similar things and using similar practices, as Maby said, about having the program indicator reference sheets and tools available so that we are measuring the same thing in the same ways, and those are all initiatives we're working on as well. And from my perspective, I came from the field. I'd been in the field working for 3 years before I came to HQ to work on this initiative, and I always felt it was going to be a great way for us to sort of raise the profile of the hard work that many people are doing, and how important the work is. So that's what I see. So finally, what are some of the lessons that we've learned, and tips, and hopefully that I can offer those that are considering embarking on this kind of adventure? The first question, I could really just leave it at the first question and make that sort of the be-all and end-all, because focusing early, and I added often, early and often, on how we're using it. What questions do we want to answer with this information? And my biggest learning from this has been that how are we doing is not a valid research question. So to start from that initial question of just let's develop a system that tells us how we're doing, was a little problematic. So if I would recommend to others, the closer you can get to really specific questions. For example, I want to know this about our work. I want to know this about our beneficiaries or our accomplishments or our programs. Trying to be specific and then continuing to be. What do you want to know now? And I'm doing that a lot now with the country programs, with the regional directors, with senior leaders, with our technical support units. What questions do you guys have about the work, about what you're doing? What are your burning issues? And are there ways that this information can help inform that, since we're all driving toward that ideal of using evidence and data for decision making. And we have a lot of data here, and we want to get it into people's hands in the most effective way we can. And so that's our biggest challenge. But just a few other tips. Engaging everybody in the process, as many people as you can, all along the way. Really, really important, even though at this stage we've had turnover and many people that were a part are gone, and the new people maybe don't recognize how much has gone into to the process and how much it has been a collaborative process. So it's important to keep sending that message as well and reminding people. I mentioned not overdoing the workload on the field and layering another set of data collection. They do have to report into the system, but it's still based on their cycles and their indicators and what they plan to report. Sorry. Don't underestimate what it takes to have a good IT system. I really admire my colleagues and the systems they have, and and thinking ahead to, it's not always possible to know what's going to come down the line, and things that have emerged now here for Mercy Corps in the last couple of years, I think will complement well, and we're going to have to work closely together in coming years to coordinate our information systems so we're not having parallel or overlapping systems. Give it plenty of time. It may take years to get it developed, and really to fully embed it in people's psyche and get to that place of it really having the utility that people imagine, but also limit the expectations people have. We've heard a lot of people say, well, we don't have to do this. Mission metrics will give us that. Mission metrics will answer this, and there are limits to what any data system can do. And a final tip that I wish I had done more of is to keep track of the successes and examples of what people think, what people say, how people use it as you go, because you will get questioned later on about whether it's worth the investment. What's it doing for us practically? So keeping track of that as throughout the development. But again, I go back to the first one. What do you really want to answer? What do you really need to know as an agency?
Well,
and that's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks to our presenters for keeping their presentations on time. So we do have time for questions and answers, and we actually already have a few questions. So I'm going to oops, sorry. I just need to make myself the presenter. Just a reminder that if you have a question, you can type it into your question box. So jumping right into the questions, and these two questions are somewhat related and could also go to any of our presenters. So after I pose the questions, Hap, Barbara, and Maby, feel free to choose one or the other to answer. So the first question is, what response would you have to World Vision's evaluation that their 12 mandatory transformational development indicators didn't work in terms of cost effectiveness, data collection, validity, and instead they've gone to non-mandatory child outcome indicators to better tap into local ownership? So that's the first question. And the second question is, as most of the indicators and efforts to collect and aggregate them can help the organization tell external audiences about the performance and outcomes achieved through projects, can any of you talk about how the findings of these indicators and the analysis you've done are informing internally the way the organization can further improve performance? And if so, what is the process in place to do this systematically? So I'll just, like I said, any of you can jump right in to address either of those questions or both.
Go
ahead.
A question to the question.
Sure, go ahead.
To the World Vision question, I'm just wondering how were these 12 mandatory transformation development indicators identified? As I explained, for ACDI VOCA, we did from the broad number of the 4,458 pieces of information, we then came up with the mandatory indicators, so it's sort of a bottom-up, if you want to call it this way. From the practice that we had in the field, that then we identify those indicators that are common and they are actually telling something towards our mission. So that's why I would like to ask World Vision, how were these identified?
The person that posed the question is not from World Vision, so don't know that the person can address that, and I don't know enough about the system to answer that question. Okay. But maybe if you, part of the answer to that question is also to talk about, as you've done, how your organizations develop the indicators that you're now using.
Right, and that's what I tried to say before. I mean, we realized that we were collecting really an incredible amount of information, and from this information we try to categorize. We try to categorize this amount of information, and that's how I identify those 5 groupings that I showed before: social change, sustainability, and reach, and so forth. And then from those, we are now in the process of making the mandatory, identifying those 12 or 15 indicators that are mandatory. Mandatory where and if appropriate and applicable.
Right, and this is Barbara, and I'll just say that evaluation of World Vision's TDI framework happened just as I was starting this process with mission metrics, and it had a huge impact on how we developed our system. I think a lot of people have learned a lot from it, and others that have started with a global top-down, here's what you have to measure, have met similar just challenges. So, our response to that was to develop these categories of indicators so that everything is still program specific, but feeds into one or more categories of indicators, and then it's still, even that, there may be things that don't fit into the framework, and that's okay too, but to try and get a better handle on how all of these tiny pieces do fit into the larger puzzle of our mission. That's sort of really been instrumental in how we have gone about it. Now, that being said, we're getting more and more demand from the field and from our technical support units to do more with standardizing the indicators, and some sectors even do want to establish mandatory indicators for their particular program areas.
Interesting. And any responses to the second question of how the the data collected through these systems can be used not only to tell your story to external audiences, but how it's reflecting changes within the organization or informing the organization's learning.
Okay, I have just a quick thing to say, and then I'll pass to my Barbara. Barbara was trying to say something I couldn't understand. We have created right now, it sort of happened at the same time, but not on purpose, created a unit that is a learning unit, and standardized learning, technical learning standards. And the whole idea is really to use this data that we have collected so far to really inform the way we do our intervention. So ACDI VOCA, as I assume all of us have a set of signature approaches of the way we do our activities. And so we really want to be able to sit down with this data and evaluate the way we've been doing agribusiness development, for example, for 50 years. But this has not happened. We just presented this data to the senior management internally last week. So I hope that the next time we meet, I have an answer, a more visual answer to this question. But we are really using this information. We're going to use this information internally to really inform the way we do agriculture development, for example.
And I think we have sort of the similar intent here at Mercy Corps, but we're actually looking at it through many different lenses, through technical support units and allowing them to dig in and see what they're learning. Our governance team right now is really looking to sort of identify what their niche is in terms of, where are we most successful, and where is where is the preponderance of our work. Are we working at local, regional, or national levels of governance? And these are things that we can use our data to help inform. And at the country level, we've asked people this year, we gave them reports on their results as part of their annual planning process, and asked them to sort of reflect on the data from those reports or any other data in terms of their strategic objectives and how does that influence their strategic planning. And we had a number of countries, not a huge number, but some countries that were saying, oh, okay, now I see from these results that, for example, we have a strategy around agriculture, but we didn't have good results, so we are investing in hiring an agricultural specialist to help us improve this area. Or somebody else said we decided to drop this since we didn't have good results. We dropped this as a strategic objective, but are building it into more of a cross-sector, cross-cutting theme in our work. So it's very sometimes incremental, and there's many different places where these kinds of uses and improvements can take place. And then soon we'll be doing the larger agency level analysis, and hopefully thinking about these results in terms of how we allocate financial resources and technical resources and such. So just a few examples.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. And I think, Hap, you were trying to say something earlier. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. On the first one, I want to go back to the first one for just a minute. The terms mandatory and common, I think, are two things that are important in this question. It's really important to try to have as much commonality, I think, across indicators, so that you really are looking across projects and across regions and adding apples and apples, or orange, or at least oranges and tangerines. So I think commonality is important, but it's really hard, as Maby mentioned, the volume of indicators that we've got, it's really hard to achieve against the variety of projects that we have. Mandating indicators is really tough because you have to, first of all, have a common indicator and some value of that indicator that you're going to mandate. People don't like being mandated to report on something, and they sure don't want to report on something that they don't see as measuring their performance. So I would say first go for the commonality as much as you can, and then later on go for the mandatory element of it. On what we've learned, BSDI hasn't been implemented yet, but when I did my validation visits, I found that both project managers as well as country managers and even regional officials at CRS found, when they understood that this system would allow them to know the coverage, both in terms of geography, gender, direct and indirect beneficiaries, that was information that, and particularly the value of comparing those measures against percent projected. So targets against actual will let them see, similar to Maby's CaPISC system, to what extent are we achieving the targets that we set for ourselves against commonly measured and commonly defined an indicator of the beneficiaries that we're trying to reach. Those are very valuable management tools and objects of the data that the field recognized. And it was one of our principal purposes of this system was to invent something that the field would value. Over.
Great. Thank you. A few more questions, and I'm going to back out so I can put this next one on the screen. Again, this first question is directed to all of you, and then we'll have a question for Hap. So first question, what roles, titles, where in the organization support these efforts, i.e. in the programs department, M&E, president's office, etc., and about how many full-time employees work on or support these initiatives on a regular basis. And then Hap, for you, a question on your efforts to calculate cost per beneficiary by service. Is there any concern that number will be used to, or how will you ensure that you avoid prioritizing cheaper services in cheaper settings as a result of starting to calculate these figures? So first question to any of you or all of you again, and second question to Hap.
Who's starting?
Go ahead.
So we have this effort was basically started by me and my team here in Washington. So we are part of the program operations department, and the mini unit is 5 people here at HQ. But the President's office has been extremely supportive, also to get the budget to purchase this database and to move forward. The database has been built outside. It was an external contractor and is maintained by a project coordinator here in Washington. So working in full-time was an external contractor and then a project coordinator here in DC.
Thank you.
Provided support.
Anyone else want to take that question?
Laia, the BSDI Beneficiary Service Delivery Initiative was really first mandated from our headquarters, the higher echelons, wanting to know what the accurate numbers were and what those numbers actually meant. But as we developed it, we found that the program department, the technical people found value in it and got involved in the definitions and the categorizations of services. And then the business development people found value in, if we can look at percent targeted services delivered, that's something that's good for business development. As I say, what I found in the field, which was pleasantly surprising, was that they found value. They're not involved in it now, but they would, once it's implemented, they find value in it. Can I answer that second question? Let me wait for Barbara to do the first question.
Okay, thanks, Sam. In Mercy Corps, this has been an initiative from from the senior leaders sort of directed it, but implemented and developed by the, we used to be DM&E, now we're the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning team. I was probably 90% dedicated to it for the first 3 years. Now I have a different role. We still have we have one person who is about 90%, 85–90% dedicated to it, and then between myself and the head of our strategy and learning team, Anna Young, we dedicate, collectively maybe another at least 50% FTE to just, and it varies, throughout the year how much time people have to devote to it. We did have a software developer for the first 2 years who is occasionally involved now in making updates, but it's really been the work of about probably overall 1 to 2 FTEs over the last 4 years.
Great, thank you. The second question.
Okay, yeah, this is a very good question. I think agencies, I know donor agencies, I worked for one, have always been wanting to try to combine technical and financial information, and there haven't been very many that have done it. So it's a powerful step if you can make it to combine those two pieces of information. But at the same time, it can be really abused. And you know, I had a vice president once who said, "Well, what's our cost per beneficiary?" It's kind of a silly number, you know, in and of itself. But if you can start getting a feel for and you can measure the costs that precisely, and not other overhead costs, then you can start to see what you're spending on the services that you're delivering, and there can be some value, I think, in that. As I say, I've never worked for an agency that had those two pieces of information combined, but theoretically I think they can be very valuable, but also they can be misused and they can be misunderstood. So I think we should be very careful when we combine them, and particularly careful when we select the cost, the cost elements that are attached and associated with performance measures. Over.
Thank you. We are almost to the end of your time, or our time, but have a question related to the software you all are using. And you've said a little bit about it, but if you could extrapolate on what it is and what level of effort it's taken to develop and maintain it.
Barbara?
Okay, I'll go first. We had an internal developer work up our system. It took probably 2 years from the earliest stages to the level it is right now. I would say he probably spent maybe 75% of his time over those 2 years on this effort. And what is it? That's what it took to develop. What it's taken to maintain it is a big challenge, because I think IT has seen it as something that's been developed, and they've moved on to a lot of other projects, and now it's really hard to get back in to make the kinds of changes that we'd like to. But I think it's really important for us now to really look at other systems and integration with other things that are happening, and try to sort of leverage our resources as much as possible, because it is something that it just grows and develops and changes over time as the agency changes, and we understand more about what we're trying to do.
As far as CaPISC, well, as I said before, we hired an external contractor and used SQL as a platform, so theoretically to be uploaded to something else, and it took us probably 1 year of back and forth with this developer, and now we are not there yet. So there is always as we use, we learn. We would like to see more functionalities and want to upgrade as much as we can. So for the developer, I don't know how long really it took him. And as far as maintaining it, I have, as I said, a project coordinator that works 30–40% of her time on these. But the people in the field are the ones who are entering the data. So it's a matter of training people in the field to enter the information and then extrapolate here. So there is 30–40% of the PC in Washington. And as a result, we're trying to build in-house something similar based on the Office 365. So hopefully, and there is 70% of a person that really works only on that right now.
Great, thank you. So we are at the end of our time. I just wanted to make one comment and then allow Holte Trondafili from World Vision to jump in to address the first question a little bit. But I wanted to note that this conversation on measuring agency level results is going to continue. We're planning another event to get additional organizations to share their experiences doing this think right now we have confirmed SAVE, PACT, and World Vision, and that will be sometime this summer. So Holte, I'm just going to give you the last word before we end so you can say something brief about this.
Okay. Hi. Again, just to clarify, it was not me who put the question. I was actually scrolling through everyone to see if I recognized anyone from World Vision who would have known about the TDIs. Just to give an idea, I was in the field when I was a project manager when TDIs were measured. The issues that TDIs had is because we are a very large organization that operates in several continents, and the way, for example, even though they tried to put together the 12 indicators, when you try to put 12 indicators that cut across several sectors and try to encompass every countries from different continents, you're going to have an indicator that the indicator in itself may not be wrong, but the way it's measured or the subtleties from one African country to Middle East, Eastern Europe, where I worked, are completely different. For example, if you take health, vitamin A in Eastern Europe, it's not something that it's of importance, or it's not as mandatory for the health of children. But that's not the reality else in Africa. Or when we measured water in Eastern Europe, we said the way the indicator was phrased was measuring the distance to the water well. Now, in Eastern Europe, that's not the reality, and we still have issues with water, but it's a complete different issue. So trying to come up with a I like to have comment about commonality. That's what our new generation of child well-being outcomes is doing, where it's a compendium that has some standard indicators that are across the industry that should be applicable for everywhere, and then it has contextualized indicators which measure essentially the same outcome. You still want children that are healthy, children that are immunized, children that are well nourished, but the way that they are measured in and I'm again picking on East Europe versus Sub-Saharan Africa, it's very different. So that kind of way of reporting, it's the one that we are developing now, and that hopefully when we have another chance to see how maybe World Vision is working now to collect data from different sectors, different continents, and present them in a way that it's similar to what we heard today, that could be something that we can address at the time.
Great. Holte, thanks for that sneak preview for the session that will be later this summer. Thank you all again for joining us. As I said at the beginning, we will be sending out the presentations and the webinar recording, so those will be accessible to you afterwards, and hope you will join us for the next conversation. Thanks very much, everyone.